Hello and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch, and more importantly, I hope you had a chance to meet some new people and share some thoughts, some ideas of perhaps inspired by what you heard this morning. It was quite interesting, to say the least, a couple of panels that we heard from this morning. We conclude this afternoon by turning our attention going from the United States government to the state government of Massachusetts, and now this afternoon to the city of Boston. And those of you who live in the city, as I do, you've got to be very proud of this place. It's just incredible where we have come from so many years ago for me, not so many for some of you young people. The city has just grown and grown and grown, and I think in a good way, but with growing comes growing pains, as any mother would know with children. We're seeing more people come into the city, more businesses. We're not just saying, okay, Silicon Valley, you can have all our MIT, Harvard, other school graduates. We'd like to keep them here. More and more are staying. More and more baby boomers are selling the homes out in the suburbs or wherever and moving into the city. We have young technical workers, pharmaceutical workers all coming in here, which present then situations with housing and education. And who better to speak to all of this than the panel that you see before you. Let me introduce to you Ayanna Pressley, who in 2009 became the first woman of color elected to serve in the council's 100-year history. That seems amazing in itself. Councilor Pressley founded and chairs the council's Committee on Healthy Women, Families, and Communities, and she told me that's why she got into this business in the first place, so she has lots to tell us. The newest addition to the council is Andrea Joy Campbell, representing District 4. And you are running for what now? Born and educated in the city of Boston and educated in Boston's public schools, Andrea remained in Boston where she began her law career. Also, please welcome Michelle Wu, the first Asian American woman. She is the first Asian American woman to serve on the council. She was elected president of the council unanimously this past January, becoming the first woman of color to hold that role. And though it's perhaps a bit later in the day than you might read her political Massachusetts playbook, please join me in welcoming Lauren Dezenski. And with that, Lauren, I'll turn it over to you.
Welcome. Thank you so much. And so I think the best part about this panel and looking at the women here is something that another city councilor has said, in that all politics are local. So I think we can kind of use that to kind of focus our discussion to a certain extent. But before we talk about being in office, let's talk about running for office and your decision to run for office. Obviously you're all women, also obviously you're all women of color. So to what extent was your decision to run for office? What did that look like? What were the considerations that you made that perhaps other women who are also looking to run for office can bear in mind?
Start with me?
Yeah.
Well, I have to first give a shout out to Anissa Sabi George, who also is the fourth woman on the council, who isn't here. One, because we were elected together, and so we tag team a lot of things. So I just wanted to give her a shout out. So for me, it was, I had to be asked a few times. I participated in a program called Emerge. Some of my Emerge sisters are here. But for me, it was a real spiritual journey. I had been working as an attorney for Governor Patrick. When I left that administration, I was truly in this space of what is next? And rather than jump into the next professional sort of opportunity, I prayed. I am confident in saying that I'm a praying woman. And so that informed my choice. And it really was a few people. One was my older brother, who got out of prison after serving almost 10 years, who said to me, "Sis, what are you doing with your life?" And of course I was shocked, because I thought, you're asking me what I'm doing with my life, and you just got out of prison. But for him, it was, you could make a real difference in your community. You have a powerful story to share. And so when I started thinking about what was holding me back from running, it really was this fear that I either wasn't qualified, I wasn't competent enough, I wasn't connected enough, and it was some of my sisters, and I'll mention one, Cornelia Rivera, who was my committee chair. I worked with her at Governor Patrick's office, who said, don't let who's in the seat hold you back, go for it. So it was women encouraging me to go for it, and my family. And so I took the leap of faith, not waiting, and I think we need to encourage people, don't wait, go for it.
Absolutely. Councilor Pressley, you agree?
So very similar. I love saying Councilor Campbell to Councilor Campbell. So I was, encouraged, recruited, drafted to run, and was my own cliche. I had spent the last decade of my life, while also an aide to a senator, serving as a founding board member of Emerge Massachusetts, also serving on the board of Mass Women's Political Caucus, shout out. But I was my own cliche. I didn't think that I was qualified, didn't think that I was ready. And I've often, felt that as women, we often don't operate with the same sense of entitlement as our male counterparts. And I think that we've allowed that word entitlement to be negatively co-opted, but it shouldn't be. You should feel entitled to an equity and opportunity to contribute, to have your perspective considered and your voice heard. And so ultimately, I said yes because I had been an aide for some 16 years, 4 of those to former Congressman Joseph P. Kennedy II, 11 of those to United States Senator John Kerry. And I said yes because I decided that my running for office would be an extension, really, of service. So in that sense, I was already qualified. And then finally, the biggest sort of motivation for me is my heart's work and my ministry and that of girls. And so it feels weird to call it even a platform. It's much more an extension of my values. But I ran on a platform to save girls. Girls that I felt didn't even know that they needed saving. But I know and I believe and have experienced that broken girls grow up to be broken women. And I wanted to bring that unique lens and strength of advocacy to government.
Wonderful. Madam President, what about you?
Well, I don't think I was ever asked to run for office by anyone until I hadn't thought about politics until much later in my life. And in fact, growing up, it didn't even cross my mind that that was a potential career option. I'm the daughter of immigrants, and my parents never discussed politics with us. I never met anyone who was in government, didn't see anyone who looked like me. And I say all the time, in fact, that people kept recruiting me to try to become a figure skater because Michelle Kwan was such a famous Asian American woman back in the day. And that's the power of role models and examples. And so I just never thought about that. It wasn't until I had graduated college and all of a sudden found myself at the age of 22 going from someone who had never thought about government to dealing with government all the time when my mom became sick with mental illness, and I was raising my 2 younger sisters, running a family business, dealing with her treatment, and had to deal with government a whole lot then, and most of the time very, very frustrating to jump through all those hoops. So I gained this consciousness that government really matters in all of the ways that matter most to families, and then made the jump from wanting to do something there to make life easier for families going through similar hardships, jumping from there to the political side after working on my former professor's US Senate campaign and helping Elizabeth Warren stump around Massachusetts, and seeing that when you have not only good ideas, but the desire to include more people in the political process, that's how you get real change. So I announced my run for office after her successful campaign, and I honestly, if I had listened to most of the people that I sat and met with when I was considering it, I wouldn't have done it.
Really?
I was too young. I was told I was too Asian, too female, and most of all, too not born in Boston. Mm-hmm. So it was a time in my life where I felt like this was a calling, and I wanted to draw attention to the ideas and the struggles of real people, and was very lucky that it worked out. But I'm happy that this panel is here because you've heard from all the other levels of government, but this is the one that really matters. Obviously we're biased, but I'm just putting that out there.
Oh yeah, do you want to add something? Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we all come from different walks of life and are bringing, our own experience formed by our life experiences, professional and otherwise, mostly personally. I mean, really our personal stories are really what have shaped and informed the issues we care about, how we govern. But this very easily could not have happened. All the recruiting and all the drafting in the world, I just wanted to highlight that very often we talk about fundraising being a barrier for women, but that's once you've decided to be a candidate.
Right.
I and many other women, and it's sort of a dirty little secret that doesn't get talked about, I cashed out my 401k to run for office. I mean, I left a job. I had been in government for 16 years. And so, we are really clamoring for a diversity of narrative in government, a diversity of female narrative. We want to hear from more mature women. We talk a lot about young people and millennials, but we want to hear from more mature women. We want to hear from millennials. We want to hear from queer women. We want to hear from Black women, Asian women, Latino women, indigenous women, right? But the reality is that, so in my life, my mother was battling leukemia, which ultimately took her life. I'm an only child. I was a caregiver. I had just purchased my first home. So nothing about my life circumstance was shovel ready to be running for office. And that is the biggest barrier for most women. So it becomes this cycle where we're saying the policies don't reflect the diversity of women's experiences and what they really need. But it's because we can't get a diversity of those perspectives around the table because of these life barriers, which are very real. So, having affordable childcare, having equal pay for equal work will go a long way in making it more possible for more women to run. And that's just the truth.
Yeah, absolutely. So in talking about these barriers that prevent women especially from running for office, I mean, what are you guys doing to help remove those barriers to make sure that more women, can run?
I mean, I can start with that. So I challenge a 32-year incumbent, and I like that Councillor Wu, thank you. I like that Councillor Wu talked about, when you personally decide that you're going to run, it does not automatically mean that you're going to sit down with people who agree with you. And so there are a lot of people who said, I think you should wait your turn. I challenged someone who was a person of color. There are people who said to me, Black people shouldn't run against Black people. There were some people who said, what have you done in your community? Even though I was from Boston, there were others who pushed back. And, well, are you really from Boston? So there was a lot of ugliness that came at me. But I think once you make that decision personally for yourself, I like to think that people will come to you and support you. And so there are many women in this room who supported my candidacy. And so now that I'm in this position, anytime someone reaches out to me to say, I'm thinking about running, or I am going to run, can I have a coffee with you? I say absolutely yes. I answer all the tough questions. How did you fundraise? How did you raise that money? How did you reach out? I share, can I look at your list? So it's really sitting down and actually being available. 2 a.m. in the morning, a candidate calling me and saying, I had a really tough day, being a listening ear. It's really important that we support one another and that once we get to these spaces, we don't forget how hard it was to get here.
Absolutely.
I would add that all three of us are also working on policies and and Councillor Sabi George as well, really pushing to make sure that there are opportunities available. I mean, Councillor Pressley, I hope you go into, it's not even possible to talk about all of the things that she's done advocating for women and girls in her time on the council. My small contribution to that last term, helping to shepherd through paid parental leave at the City of Boston, which I hope will not only make it more financially possible for women to continue in their careers in whatever capacity they choose, but to also set the tone for other levels of government to follow. And then I would just add that I hope that in being comfortable with being a visible example of how messy life is, that is making it more okay for women to think about it too. I have a 15-month-old, and I am not shy about talking about how tricky it is to balance everything. The way that our society makes it very, very difficult for new moms and new dads to be a good parent and to be a good employee or a good boss. So I have led city council meetings with spit up or mashed banana on my jacket very proudly. I have my son with me from time to time. I've breastfed him on the council floor and gotten some pushback for that, but until we have more examples of how difficult it is to do this, that's how we generate momentum for actually changing the policies.
Absolutely.
Just also, so two quick things on the narrative side that I think are barriers as well that are uncomfortable to talk about, but you know, I can't pretend. I'm not extraordinary. There is a reason why I'm the first woman of color elected. A lot of it was timing and the readiness of an electorate that had not been for 104 years. So there were many people that spoke in code in saying, well, we're not sure that Ayanna Pressley can appeal to traditional voters. And there was a question as to whether or not a black woman could represent an entire city. So in addition to the same challenges that Michelle faced in terms of Boston being incredibly tribal, very parochial, this being an adopted home for me, there were people that were repeatedly questioning, could a black woman represent the entire city of Boston, which was asinine and ludicrous. We had a black governor, absolutely. But the other thing on the narrative side that I wanted to say is that I find that women often discriminated against women like me who were single and unmarried and childless. And I think that that is also a narrative that we need to embrace. There were many people, just outright, people would say, well, I'm not sure you can relate to my struggles because you didn't attend Boston Public Schools, you don't have a child in Boston Public Schools, you're not married. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that we have to be more tolerant and more inclusive as women of a diversity of those narratives, and that also makes it easier, so.
Absolutely. Now, looking at your positions on the council and, the fact that really all of your candidacies and your successes are quite historic, do you think that this is the new normal for the Boston City Council, or do you think that this is an aberration?
I hope so.
Madam President.
So when I was elected in 2013, we doubled our numbers from 1 to 2, and then we doubled them this year from 2 to 4, so just saying there's still room to go.
Okay.
But I think there's a big disconnect between the sort of echo chamber of what people might call the grass tops or the insiders in politics and the advice that they give you as you're sitting down to run. And I remember, a lot of the discouragement that I received was well-intentioned, people wanting to see me not make a fool of myself and wanting me to be realistic about my odds, although I saw them as differently than they did. But when you actually get out there and start knocking on doors and talk to real people in Boston, it feels like there's a big disconnect. The general electorate, the residents of Boston are ready for government to reflect the public, and they're ready for new ideas. They're ready for representation from all different groups. Because it's not just about us as individuals and our own personal experiences, although I think that makes for much more impassioned and authentic leadership in office. But I think it's important that I am a woman and an Asian American and a young person and a mom, because it makes it that much easier for those groups to feel like there's someone in government that they can connect to, that they can pick up the phone and there's someone who understands and wants to champion that policy. So I think it's about us being a focal point or an amplifier for different segments of the community.
Do you have anything to add, either of you?
I think I would just say that due to popular culture and the fact that we are seeing more women elected, there has been this concentration in numbers on the council previously. It's just been a very long time since we had that. So, and I do think that voters are habitual, and so when they get in the habit of doing something, and they do feel a greater stake in government when they see themselves reflected. But it's not just about seeing yourself reflected. We have to support our elected officials in standing firmly in that identity politic. We are often discouraged from doing that. Don't just stand in being a woman or being a person of color. I hear that very often. You'll stereotype yourself. You'll pigeonhole yourself. And so if we are going to vote to see a greater gender and racial parity represented in government, then we have to support people in standing firmly in however they identify. And the last thing I would say is I think there's been a big push in defining civic engagement just by voting and public service simply by running. And I don't want us to lose sight of the people behind the people that are just as important, particularly as upstart candidates when no one else thinks you're viable. You had a woman campaign manager. We need to be building that bench too. Women that know how to cut turf and write a field plan, to do messaging and communications, who know how to write policy. And so that's important too. So it's not just about the name on the ballot. We need to be building a bench of those operatives and those people behind the candidates as well that are women.
And I have to quickly add to that. So I had a woman campaign manager. I had a woman field director, Caroline, who's here today, and it's not just about the candidate. You have to have a solid team of individuals who not only support you, but are about what you're trying to get done. But I will add this. If there's anything I learned about my run for city council is that we can't wait. We can't always wait to create the pipeline. We can't always wait for someone to ask. You can't always wait for someone to agree that, I'm gonna run. What do you think? Yes, let's do it. You have to go for it. And the sooner we start going for it, the faster we'll get to this goal of changing the numbers in government, at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level. We need to be encouraging our young people to say, if you feel it in your spirit, if you feel it as a passion, go for it. And I don't think that we do that enough. Sometimes it really is talk about creating the pipeline. I once heard Ambassador Swanee Hunt say, screw the pipeline. I think she was saying if we wait to really do this pipeline thing, that we might not actually, it would take us years to try to get to the numbers that match our demographics in the Commonwealth. And that's a problem. I think we need to encourage women to step up when they feel it and to go for it, and then we need to rally behind them. And we need to create those teams of women who are behind the scenes and support them in doing the work, because my campaign manager had never been a campaign manager before. My field director had never been a field director before. So that talent is out there. We just have to tap into it, and we have to give opportunities to these women.
That's the hardest part.
Now, one thing that I do want to note, looking out on the faces in the crowd here, it is fairly overwhelmingly female, and I want to kind of recognize that. Yeah, which is fantastic. But I think, we also need to understand that, obviously we are all aware of the fact that, men vote as well. And so what role do, surprise, even though isn't it overwhelming, I don't know. What role do men and male allies play in this process? Or, for you as successful female candidates, are you thinking, ladies, leave your man at home. We're going to focus on this. Sorry for the Beyonce reference. Yes. But, to what extent are you also looking at the role that men can play in becoming a successful female candidate? This is a jump ball here.
Well, I think with anything that you want to accomplish, you have to create a coalition. You can't do it alone. And so I have two staffers here who are men, and they're young men, Sean over here and Jawan, who are happy to be here, and they're here. And they're here, and I wanted them to be here because they support women, they support me, they supported me. They were volunteers in my campaign who blew me away. They had never worked on a campaign before. The people who helped fundraise for me were men. My partner at home is a man, and if he didn't get it, if he didn't put aside a little bit of his own aspirations and daily life to really support me, I wouldn't be here. So it takes a coalition and an effort outside of just women to do this work. My brother, if my brother didn't say to me, sis, you can do this, I wouldn't be here. So I think it's important that we think bigger. It's not just about who's in the room. We need to expand and bring more people in the room.
Absolutely. I agree. So in terms of, let's see, we've got some other questions in here. How are we doing on time, by the way? We're good? Cool. So in terms of women's issues, if we're looking at one of the big initiatives that passed the city council, which is paid maternity leave, what would you guys say is the next big issue that you're looking at that can really benefit the women in the city of Boston?
Well, I mean, it's a little frustrating to always be categorizing issues as women's issues or not women's issues. I would say that if along those same lines of issues that are disproportionately impacting women, particularly new moms, but also our paid parental leave policy was moms and dads, all family types. But Councilor Pressley's been leading on childcare as an industry, that we have to solve that piece of it. If we're now getting closer to the point where a new baby can come and we recognize that parents need time, paid time off to be with the baby, well, once they get old enough that they need some sort of childcare and early education, we have to figure out that piece and how to make that affordable as well. But I would say any of the issues that we're talking about on the council are directed towards increasing opportunities for participation, for economic opportunity, for affordable housing. When we're a city that has such a large percentage of female-headed households, everything is a women's issue, really. And so Councilor Pressley and I just filed a hearing order on procurement and purchasing in the city, trying to make sure that our city dollars are intentionally being directed to create pipelines for new businesses to grow and to support Boston-based businesses owned by women and by people of color. I filed something recently on transit. Being able to get around the city is fundamental to accessing affordable housing, to accessing good jobs. But I'd say everything that we do has that lens of this needs to be a city where everybody has the opportunity to succeed.
I kind of want to piggyback off of that a little bit. Is it ever frustrating to try and approach things? I mean, as you said, in making people understand that women's issues are issues that affect everyone. I mean, I think Councilor Pressley, looking at it with, looking at things for women and girls, how do you get everyone to kind of be on board with this and not feel like it's just a niche issue?
Yeah. Well, I think about my first term where I was working with a broad and diverse coalition of young parents and advocates to establish a pregnant and parenting teen policy within our Boston public schools to strengthen those pathways to graduation. And that's because 1 in 4 girls that drops out because they are pregnant. Many of them don't know it is their right to complete their education, and we were not making it easy for them. And oftentimes when I would be talking about this issue, people would say, well, I don't have a teen daughter, why should I care? So I would hope that if people, or what we try to do is to highlight, I want to be very intentional about building healthy communities through cultural advocacy and through policy development, that the health of the individual, the family, and the community are inextricably linked. So making that point that as much as I would like for you to support this legislation or this initiative or this policy based on moral imperative, some benevolence and getting that we're all connected, oftentimes you've got to appeal to the economic realities, and that if we don't make this investment here, this is how it will compromise and choke at the promise of us. Trauma is another issue that I work on, and people will say, well, my child hasn't been exposed to or experienced violence. I don't really get this trauma thing. But I know that it is choking at the promise of our families and our communities because it is destabilizing. And then a more specific policy issue that I would raise, just in looking at, and I think to Councilor Wu's point, we have to consider all these things holistically. And I do think, to play the gender card, one of the things that women do very well and uniquely is to look at an issue in its totality and to consider the interconnectedness and the interrelatedness of all these issues and to bring fully to bear all our experiences in addressing that. So the issue that Councilor Wu raised relative to early ed and care, that's an issue I'm working on because one of the leading informal economies in low-income and communities of color are community-based early ed and care providers, which are disproportionately women. Why? Because it's the only way they can afford to stay home with their child. So how do we strengthen that professional development opportunity for them, because it is a leading informal economy in those communities, and make sure that they have opportunities for professional development. We're trusting them with our children, and they're getting paid peanuts, you know? So, but that's an issue that affects our economy and the health of the community and the stabilization of our families, so.
And do you feel that, you know, when you explain it that way, you know, to other elected officials or anyone that you're trying to, you know, in a sense, build this coalition, does that stick?
Well, it depends on how good I am at it, right? You know, right there, I was a little long, so it wasn't as effective as it could be. You know, some days you're more succinct. Brevity isn't my strong suit. I'm working on it. You know, some days you're more succinct. But I find, let me just say this: I ran on a platform to save girls. Okay, and there were people that said you shouldn't run for city council. That's not the job of municipal office. Gender-specific programming, yada yada. Go run a nonprofit. Okay, and they really stereotyped who would care about girls and women, and it was so affirming to have men saying, thank you for fighting for my grandmother, for my mother, for my sister, for my daughter. You know, so we can't stereotype neighborhoods, we can't stereotype issues, and I find that they are receptive. You know, for a little bit of time, I was alone on the council, and my male colleagues I found were very receptive of the issues that I was championing in this agenda. The reason the issues had never been addressed before is because there was a lack of perspective. It wasn't malice, it was just a lack of perspective.
I'll add this really quickly. I mean, one thing I think that's great about the council is that we can have an impact outside of the council. So obviously we have equal pay going on in the State House. And so what we can do and have been doing is mobilizing people within our communities who overlap with our reps in those districts to say, let me tell you about the equal pay bill. So just pulling them in and connecting them to things, not just things that are happening at the council, but things that are happening at the state level, at the federal level, involving issues related to women. But I would also say sometimes it depends on your perspective. I chair public safety and criminal justice. And if you ask people that I talk to now that I'm only in month 3, so I'm having these conversations almost like a lot of informational meetings with people at the State House, you name it, community-based organizations. And sometimes from their perspective, it's what about incarcerated women? So getting people to care about women's issues in a broader way from different perspectives is also equally important.
Very good. And just kind of to broaden this out a little bit, you know, looking at supporting other women, particularly other women running for office. I know what you all are supporting Hillary Clinton for president, correct?
Correct.
Yes.
To what extent did her gender play a role in your decision to support her? Jump ball.
So for me, it's the piece that comes in on the back end to make me angry, and I'll back up and explain what I mean by that. As a millennial, as someone who sees, you know, many in my generation, as the news media has been characterizing it, so supporting Bernie Sanders because of the vision and the big ideas. You know, I did struggle, and the Sanders campaign's message does resonate with me deeply. However, I know from my time in government that there's a difference between having, you know, being able to talk about big lofty ideas and getting things done. And I just think if we look at Hillary Clinton's resume, there's no person that has potentially ever been as qualified to run for president as someone who has done policy within the White House, who has served in the United States Senate, has been a cabinet member, has represented the United States abroad. If she were not a woman, I just think if she were a man, we wouldn't even be questioning anything about what she's doing. So I find myself standing with her because she has the track record, she has the vision, she has the ability to actually make change in the White House. And it's just icing on the cake to know that we'll have the first woman president.
You guys agree?
I agree. I mean, I'm not supporting Hillary simply because she's a woman. That's probably the last thing at the bottom of the list. It's like a plus. I'm supporting her because I believe that she knows how to get things done. It's one thing to have these great ideas, and I agree with Councillor Wu that Bernie's message has resonated with me. My household is split. My fiance is originally from Vermont, so he is feeling the burn. But that being said, when it's one thing to rally people, and I think about this in the context of District 4. There are 70,000 people that live in District 4, only about 10,000 come out to vote. In order to change the world, to change policies, we need to mobilize these people. It's one thing to mobilize them and get, say, 50,000 of them down at the City Council. It's another thing to say, why are you here? And if we're here to do X, Y, and Z, how are we going to do it? And I think she speaks to the how piece with specifics that I think is missing from the other candidate.
I mean, I would just say it is not lost on me that my 7-year-old stepdaughter in her lifetime will see an African-American president, and if I have anything to do with it, the first female president of the United States of America. That is very powerful. And, you know, I'll just say I'm supporting her because I do believe she has an understanding of what I was alluding to earlier, the interconnectedness of things, you know, the disparities and injustices and inequities along social lines, cultural lines, political lines. And I want someone that is governing with that sort of holistic approach when it comes to policy. And so I believe in her vision. I believe in her plan to support that vision. You know, it's very powerful to me and matters that she has been a fighter for women and girls worldwide, not just her political career, but her entire life. The fact that she wants to treat human trafficking as a criminal justice issue and named that. The fact that when she speaks about the school to prison pipeline, she didn't only name boys, she talked about girls and the push out policies that Black and brown girls are disproportionately experiencing, re-entry, the same thing. And then finally, I'll just say, you know, I'm gonna support who I think sees me. And I believe she sees me. And not just someone committed to mitigating the pain in my community because of disparities and equities and injustices along all those lines previously cited, but also that sees the promise of my community. You know, I don't want someone that only sees my community in crisis. I want someone that sees that I'm wearing a crown too. So, you know, I tweeted this earlier, you know, at like 5 in the morning because I was really worked up about it. You know, again, I'm gonna support who sees me. And, you know, at the end of the day, for me, being Black and being a woman is not a burden. You know, the burden is when you have a political discourse and a world that only sees you as a Black woman through a monolithic viewpoint. And that's what we have got to address to challenge the climate and the culture to not address any of us as a monolith. Millennials, LGBT, African Americans, we are letting folks off the hook. I want you to address the totality of me. You don't get to say, well, you're a woman, I support reproductive freedom, are you good? Okay, well, you're Black, and I'm gonna end mass incarceration, are you okay? Okay, you're Latina, I'm committed to immigration reform. Okay, gay folks, you have marriage equality, are you okay? I want someone that is going to address the totality of me in all of my beauty and all of my complexities, and that's what I want in a president. So.
And you believe it so much that you tore your ACL while campaigning for Hillary Clinton in South Carolina recently.
That's just the truth. But yes, we can talk about the toll that this work that we love takes on our bodies. I'm the oldest one up here. I'm 42 and holding. Okay, and you know this work is very hard on the body. So yes, I have 2 bad knees. Thank you, democracy. Yeah. So
you are in it. You are physically in it for Hillary
absolutely.
Clinton. All right, I think it is time for audience questions. Someone has a mic, and I was told to also look up to you guys up there.
Oh, yeah.
You? Yeah. She has an arm up.
Marie St. Fleur.
There's a bunch of people.
Yeah.
Hi, my name's Courtney. I am an intern with the Massachusetts Women's Political Caucus. And you guys and you guys kind of touched on the subject, but recently, Gloria Steinem, who's a very famous feminist, recently said that it is, as a woman, their duty to vote for Hillary Clinton, obviously, and a lot of feminists of newer generations were kind of upset by that because they felt that that went against everything that feminism believes in. So do you obviously, all of you, don't believe to vote solely on gender, but a lot of people do. The debate has come up that do you believe that that women should vote for women just for the sake of being progressive within U.S. government, or based off of what their policies really believe in?
Well, I can quickly say, I didn't want someone to vote for me just because I was a woman. I didn't want someone to vote for me just because I was black. I wanted people to vote for me because they believe in what I was going to try to accomplish on the city council. And I think it's important that you know what that person's going to do when they get there. They can be a woman and not support reproductive rights. They can be a woman and not support the things that you believe in. They can be a person of color and not support getting rid of mandatory minimums and stuff like that. So it's important that you pay attention to the details, the fine print, so you know what you're getting. And being informed. You have to be an informed voter, and that's what I'm constantly talking about, the importance of being informed when you make your choice.
You know, it is a tension, though, and I think it's a great question because the act of choosing someone to support is so personal, right? You even if it's someone that you haven't met or may never meet, you are throwing your lot in for someone because you believe in them to some extent. And so that has to be a decision that you are comfortable with along the many criteria that go into that. And I know that when I see, so for example, there's this new TV show, Fresh Off the Boat, right, which has Asian Americans starring in it, and I just get so excited. I don't know the actors, but for me, seeing Asian Americans out there is something that really, Jeremy Lin, same thing, right? I found myself trying not to cheer against the Celtics when he was playing in Boston, but there are pieces that move you for whatever reason, and you need to feel, I think it's our job as elected officials and as candidates to make that connection based on policy and based on ideas and issues and what you're going to do in office. At the same time, a lot of people are too busy these days to tune in and fully check out what a candidate stands for and what they've done and how they voted in the past. And people will vote based on some aspect of identity because they're taking that as a proxy for shared experience. That because you are a woman, you understand what I've struggled with as a woman or my potential as a woman. Because you are Asian American, we have some sense of having a shared mission or goals or values. Now, that isn't always the case, and so it's sort of it falls to voters to do your homework. But there is this constant tension because you want to feel excited about politics, and you can get excited about any number of dimensions. Okay.
Hi. So I just want to say thank you so much for talking about childcare because I was really so curious about the morning panel about that issue. I'd just like to hear more. Oh, sorry. Can anyone hear me? I think it's really coming to hit home now. I work with people, a lot of women as a career coach in their mid-20s, early 30s, and this is when the kind of childcare issue really comes to hit home. And when we think about being inclusive of women in the political process in all levels of leadership, this seems to be one of the biggest barriers. Even, for example, today there's a woman who absolutely should be here, has a young son, couldn't make it because she couldn't find childcare. And I'd just love to hear more about the initiatives you guys are working on and how we can support those to moving towards a place where we value raising children as a society even before we're at that place ourselves.
Well, where's Megan Costello? Right there? Okay. So Megan's really the person who should be answering this on behalf of the city because in her role leading the Mayor's Office of Women's Advancement, we have had so many conversations about this exact problem. When you have daycare that is just as expensive as college tuition or a mortgage, you're really asking women to think very hard about whether you go back to work or not, regardless of what you want to do. When you're putting in time at the office just to make enough money to pay for childcare, it really, really burdens a woman's career. So I had filed this last year, well, I'm going to file it again, around making sure that the city of Boston is doing all we can to look at on-site childcare in any new office building that's built. We are very lucky in that, or I'm very lucky in that City Hall daycare has been on-site at City Hall for 27 years. And so we have an incredibly quality, incredibly warm environment right on the 4th floor in City Hall. I come to work with my son, I drop him off, And if I can rearrange my schedule so that he can come out early at the end of the day, I can drop in and see him, pick him up. And it is just, especially in the early days when I was worrying about, would he be hungry? Is he fussy? Knowing that they're right there in the building makes all the difference in the world. So every employee should have access to that in a perfect world, and every employer, every building owner should be asked to think very hard about that. And we have requirements in place right now around new buildings and how much should be set aside for childcare. There's all this work that needs to be done on supporting childcare in home settings, because that's how we get at the affordability piece as well, while we're waiting for state and federal government to offer more funding. But increasing the supply of quality childcare is very important as well.
Other questions?
Can Megan say something, Lauren?
Oh yeah, please. Someone get her a mic.
Is that we have to think about this in a holistic way. Government has a role to play here that's very significant and very important, but we also have to be talking to individual women, individual child care providers, and employers as well, because this is not just about what's the right thing to do. This is good for the bottom line for every company, and it's good for the economy as a whole. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, I can't say enough about that, government benefits when, as policymakers, we are accessible and actively listening to the people we represent. We say that all the time, that's where our best ideas come from. I know there are some employers that actually provide both childcare and adult daycare, because that is the reality of our lives. Many of us are caregivers. And so, how do we have policies that are holistic and intentional about supporting, our complicated lives? People in the dawn, the prime, and the twilight of their lives. Many of us are, caring for young children while also caring for an aging parent. So, there are now employers where you can drop off both your mother and also your child. So we have to be more innovative in that way as well.
Excellent. Another question.
First, I'd like to say thank you, because I did not resonate fully with this event until this last panel. So I really appreciate
Why is that?
just being able to connect.
Oscar.
But my question is, what were some of the hurdles that you faced stepping into your roles, or making headway into what would be the positions that you hold now?
Just curious, because I think we all want to know, why did you not resonate with anything until this panel?
Not that I didn't resonate,
Right,
but
right.
that I fully resonate now.
Right.
I don't know. I think just being a young Black woman, it's encouraging to see, forerunners and women who stand up and create the platform for us. I did not consider public office until now. I mean, I was having people were encouraging me during lunch when they asked me some questions, and I got loud, as I tend to do, and they said, "Oh, you should really," and I said, not for me. But now, seeing your faces and hearing your experiences, it is encouraging. So thank you.
Oh, fantastic. Let's talk about hurdles.
So, I'll start since I'm in month 3. And we talked about this a little bit. There's no manual when you step into the council about how you do things and when you do things. So it is sometimes a little daunting to walk in and say, now you're in the business of now governing. And what that looks like is not always easy. But I will say what's most exciting about right now is we have a blank slate that we can build anything on top of. So I see nothing but the possibilities. And when I look at it from that perspective, I feel more empowered. I feel more confident that we can do so much more for the people of District 4. And I will say it's great to have not only these two awesome women, but Anissa, who joined the council with me. We sometimes bounce ideas off of each other. I mean, we both joined together. We have formed a friendship, have formed a relationship, not just through the campaign, but as we come into office. And so I say it's all about your perspective, rather than look at it as a detriment when there is no manual and there is no way of doing things, that you can actually do whatever you like. And so what's great about that is you can start creating new ways of doing things. You can respond the way you want to respond. You can bring your gut and what you feel in every single choice, and that's exciting. And I think we need more women to do things like that.
I completely agree. I think it's about the hurdle being not being captured by the way that things have always happened and feeling like you have to do things that same way. Also, if you don't know Judith Garcia, who's sitting right there with Chelsea City Councilor, you need to get to know her and make sure she's helping you run for office as well.
You guys should talk.
It's very easy when you come into an institution, government, that is governed by tradition and many years of history, especially as a young person and someone who maybe looks different from those many years of history, to listen to the advice that everyone's giving you based on how things have always happened, and then get stuck in that same rut. I'll just give one small example of how the committee assignments were allocated this year. The council presidency is a very interesting process of negotiations and asking people for their vote, and often I hear the way that it's been done is with a lot of pressure, a lot of backdoor conversations, and essentially saying, if you sign up to vote for me, I'm going to help you get the committee that you want to get. That leads to a process where people aren't making decisions in their own best interest. There's a lot of time crunch associated with it. And so this year, regardless of how people were voting, I made the list of committees, handed it out to everyone, asked people to please fill out from 1 to 16, what's your rank preference for what you want to serve on, and then just threw all the data in a spreadsheet and made the decisions that way. And it was so clear when you have the data that certain people care more about certain issues, and we could end up with a committee assignment list that was more reflective of people's interests, their motivations, and what they wanted to get done in office. And I had all sorts of people telling me at the time, you better not do that. You better not pass this out. You better not make this list public. Who knows what will happen when the media gets at this and that. And at a certain level, you have to just be comfortable with your own decision of when you step up to lead, how you lead, and don't be afraid to define leadership differently. I'm not tall, I'm not loud. I grew up as a very shy young girl. And I have had to accept the fact that in many rooms that I walk into, I'm still mistaken for a staffer of someone else, some other elected official. And you take every assumption, every stereotype, and you can flip it the other way and just be confident in what drives you in that role. And the final thing I'll say about hurdles is something I was saying to Leslie from lunch earlier, that you can't make the decision when the opportunity opens up and you're thinking about whether or not to run for office or whether or not to step up and reach for that next position of leadership. Don't make that decision based on whether you think you're fully ready for the job. You need to make that decision based on whether you think you're the best person for the job as is compared to the other people who will be stepping up if you don't. So often we see many candidates, they're often men, sorry guys who are in the room, who are raising their hands and they're ready from day one, whereas women are saying, well, I want to finish learning about all of the policy steps first. I want to make sure I have a good grasp of the entire city budget before I feel ready. Chances are you're already ready compared to the field, and you need to give yourself the benefit of the doubt in knowing that you will be able to grow in that position of leadership as well. So don't hold yourself to just your own standard, but think about what you're going to contribute and whether that's for the best of the entire community.
Anything to add? We've 1 minute left. You have a question?
I have something to add, but I want to get another question.
Oh, wait, yeah.
Hi, I'm Griseli. I'm from Lawrence High School. I came from, I came with the Chica Project. My
Yeah,
question,
Chica! Woo! Nudies Camargo.
My question is,
That's
my
a
question
Chica.
is, in your opinion, how can young people create change in their cities? How can we inspire our friends to engage in a social impact?
Big question. Anyone take this?
I was going to give you the last word.
No, I don't want to have the last word. I mean, you're doing it by being here. So, I mean, that's and by being a part of Chica. I mean, I think, each one teach one. However you're empowered and whatever you learn, please do pass it on. Don't monopolize it. I think we have seen young people for generations since the beginning of time usher in and lead every movement in this country. So change has happened because of the input, the influence, and the sweat equity of many a young person. So what I would say is there is not an eligibility age to be an activist, and you shouldn't ask permission. And one of the reasons why I know we're all very passionate about the need for there to be civics and leadership opportunities in school. I mean, let me just say, I tested gifted, but you wouldn't have known by my grades. I had a lot of drama going on in my life and trauma that was a barrier to my learning. My grades never reflected my aptitude. If there had not been civics and leadership opportunities, I ran for class president in 7th grade and maintained that position until 12th grade. No one beat me. And, but honestly, it set me on a path. I wasn't someone that excelled, in science, in history. I excelled in the humanities, but, I think don't wait until you're 18. That opportunity to civically engage and to participate is all around you all the time in micro, small ways, and in macro, major ways. And then the final thing I would say is to make sure that your activism goes beyond a retweet or a like. I think, social media, it's an incredible platform. Someday we should have a conversation just about the influence of social media in politics and what that impact has been. I have a lot to say about that. The reason why I was up at 5 o'clock in the morning is because I can't stop responding to Twitter trolls, so I need to work on that. That's the toughest part of this work, is to not take it personally. It's very hard because it's all personal, why we do this, right? So to take your activism beyond social media, I mean, it's an empowering and incredible platform, but don't think you've done your benevolent act for the day, that you've done your activist act for the day simply because you like something or retweet it. Take it to the streets. And the ballot box. Yeah. And the ballot box.
Vote. Register to vote. Excellent. Well, I think that is all the time we have. Thank you so much, counselors. This was wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Good job. Thank you. You found it. I know.
Can we stay
a year ago?
That was weird.
You found me.
Well, you ladies are quite an inspiration, and if you young folks were looking for a how-to to move forward, to follow your desires, you sure did have a panel of phenomenal teachers.
And a great moderator. Lauren!
And Michelle, good for you to stand up and take the risk and say, this is a crazy way to do business, appointing people this way. Let's do it, put the best person in the job who really wants to be there. That took a risk, and good for you for having done that. I think all of the panelists today, those of you who've been here since early this morning, have, as I have, been rewarded with a lot of information. And I take away something that I hope you do as well, that we Americans are Americans first, before we're women and white and black and Hispanic and whatever. And that we are, for this country to move forward, and we are in a crisis in so many ways, that we need to think of the totality of our country. That means government people, that means community organizations, that means business. A quick story to share with you on the issue that so many of you who have brought up, and way back at 9 this morning, I said that back in the 60s, someone like me couldn't even get an interview to get a job because employers were worried that once we had a baby, we'd quit. The issue of being women and mothers and career people remains. We are still the mothers. There is one of the great privileges of having lived the life I lived as a reporter is you get to meet so many people and be introduced to so many ideas. I'm going to just share one with you that relates to what seems to be the big concern in this room right now about working as a mother. I love to search for companies or people or institutions that have ideas that work. And back in the day in television, we could do those kind of stories. So I found a company, J&J, Johnson & Johnson, who's headquartered in New Jersey, I believe, at the time. And J&J instituted a family program within their headquarters. They had a gym, including a track. They had a child care center. They had a medical clinic. Within that clinic, they had anti-smoking programs, drug programs, and so forth. And they had a cafeteria that was proportioned. Here, if you only wanted to eat vegetables and so forth, it was over here. They didn't serve things that were bad for you, but it wasn't all green, if you will. So they gave you a choice. And what J&J found, because everything costs money. You have to look at the bottom line, no matter what part of the world you're in. What J&J found was their bottom line improved because A, their recidivism rate decreased dramatically. It's been too long for me to tell you the exact percentage. They found that sick days decreased dramatically because, as you were saying, someone was talking about your child being in the same room at City Hall. Michelle, a woman feels comfortable to know, geez, I'm nearby. I lived 1.5 miles from my home, so I was nearby if there was a crisis, if I had to get back. So J&J kept their program going. Well, I thought, what more? What more does anybody need, you know? So I put this program on the air thinking, and called all kinds of companies in and around Boston, went to my own bosses and said, look at this. You know, we could emulate this and you'll make more money and people will be happier and they won't be sick and they'll be comfortable being moms with their kids nearby and they'll quit smoking and yada, yada. Well, I wish I could stand here and tell you that the whole world followed the J&J example, despite the reporting that we did on it, but they didn't. There were a few companies at the time, this was in the 80s, here in Boston, smaller companies that did that to some extent. But I'm thinking that you women, who are in positions of promulgating ideas, and you share time with people in business as well as government and community agencies, maybe push that idea. Because the government can't pay for everything. You know, you run out of working people to pay for it all. That's where the money comes from. So the more we can incorporate our whole society into our effort as Americans first, the better off we will all be. And I take that from this morning and this afternoon session. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed the panelists. And to conclude our program and say adieu, please welcome Dr. Jean McCormick, who runs this institution.
Well, I have the great joy of being able to say thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you to Celia Richa, who's sitting in the front row, and Kelly Bovio is in the back, who do the work to put this program together. But they're inspired by our community partners. We're thrilled that our host committee agreed to work with us on this, people who have for a long time been committed to these issues. But it's so consistent with our mission here. What the senator hoped for is this would be a place where people would find their voice by pretending to be a senator, but really touching into the power that we all have as Americans. So I wanted to end with a quote that comes from a speech he gave when he endorsed President Obama in 2008. But I think it is about the message Natalie just gave as well. If we dare to set our course for the shores of hope, we together will go beyond the divisions of the past and be able to find a place to make the America of the future. Women's leadership is part of the America of the future. Thank you all for being here today.